It is 11:30. That only means one thing. Time to dive into all things people, power, and politics. This, my friends, is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. It's time to take a break from social media, perhaps a welcome one, or reading more about who was picked in the first round of the NFL draft, and just hang out with us for the political news that you need. We're talking tariffs once again. The president insists there's been talks with China, even though Beijing says that's not true. How a dealership owner says it's impacting his business. Plus, Perry Johnson and Coleman Young Jr. talk import taxes and the economy as a whole. And lawmakers debate how to make students stay off their phones in class. The proposals and exceptions that are on the table right now. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. But we begin in the courtroom because the Trump administration took several losses today on a number of some of the big agenda items. So we're going to begin with another man a judge says was wrongfully deported to El Salvador. We only know the man's first name is Christian. He's 20 years old and has a pending asylum application. Now, the judge appointed by President Donald Trump says the administration violated a 2019 settlement agreement when they deported Christian. A group of migrants sued in July of 2019, claiming the government unlawfully modified policies governing asylum applications by unaccompanied children. The DOJ claims the judge doesn't have jurisdiction to review Christian's removal or compel his return. Staying on the immigration issue for a moment, where another judge said the Trump administration is not allowed to deny or condition federal funds to sanctuary cities. Now, those are cities that limit cooperation with federal immigration efforts. President Trump had ordered his attorney general and Homeland Security secretaries to withhold money to those sanctuary cities. And another order told every federal agency to make sure payments don't encourage sanctuary policies. And a third federal judge blocking the Trump administration from immediately changing federal elections, including adding a proof of citizenship requirement to the federal voter registration form. Now, that block is in place while a lawsuit plays out. But she denied other requests from the Democratic plaintiffs, including refusing to block the president's order to tighten mail ballot deadlines. It's already, by the way, a felony for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. Well, from the southern border to our border with Canada, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib says more than 200 people have been detained at the Detroit-Windsor border. That was between January and March, and she says most of them simply made a wrong turn at the border. Tlaib tells us she visited Customs and Border Patrol last month and says some of those detentions included families and one person who was held more than 12 and a half days. That's despite her saying the facility isn't equipped for long-term stays. Take a listen.
I want to make something very clear. I believe, and like I said at my town hall last night, that the erosion of due process is a threat to all of us, no matter your name, no matter your immigration status. A wrong turn should not lead to a disappearance and an erosion of someone's due process or being treated with human rights.
Tlaib and other advocates say there needs to be more oversight and transparency. Customs and Border Patrol says the Port of Detroit facility was established in case undocumented immigrants need to temporarily be housed. An agency spokesperson says it ensures all people in custody are treated respectfully and lawfully. A lot of you chiming in on this story on our Fox 2 Detroit Facebook page. Here's what some of you had to tell me. Mary says, heavy traffic, unfamiliar road, too many signs to read, and too little time. Haven't you ever made that mistake? Steven says, if someone skips due process to enter the country, the proper way then, they don't deserve due process to stay in the country. And Steffi says the amount of you so proud to be traitors to the Constitution is insane. MAGA has exposed they were indeed never patriots. Well, President Trump will mark his first 100 days in office right here in Metro Detroit. It'll be his first visit to the Great Lakes state since returning to the White House. We sort of know where this rally will be held, Macomb County. Yeah, I know that doesn't really narrow it down, but the White House hasn't released any other details about the visit, including the venue or the time. Of course, we all know Michigan played a huge role in getting him back to the White House, but he hasn't traveled much since taking office. His only other trips were visiting disaster zones in North Carolina and California and promoting his plan to eliminate tip taxes in Las Vegas. And yes, I am putting in a request to interview the commander-in-chief here on Michigan's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. You may be laughing or shaking your head. Guess what? Fox 2 has had 4 exclusive interviews with President Trump in the last 8 years, a couple with Biden and Harris as well. So let's see if this pans out. Turning now to the trade war, where talks between the U.S. and China are either on or off. That is depending on who you believe. Take a look at what I'm talking about. China's denying they're in active negotiations with the Trump administration, going so far as to say any notion of progress is as groundless as, quote, trying to catch the wind. That's according to Beijing. Reporters asked President Trump about that today, where he had this to say.
Can you clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China? They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China. And so I think you have, Jeff, as usual, I think you have your reporting wrong.
Now, as you know, every single night here on The Pulse, we've been keeping such a close eye on the stock market since these tariffs were announced, and it was another good day on Wall Street. All three major indices were up to end the day. The Dow up 486, the NASDAQ up 457, and the S&P also showing the green there, which is good news, up 108. Well, tonight we're diving deeper into the tariff issues. We'll get into the political side of it in just a few moments, but what about how it affects all of us on Main Street, the bottom line? Thad Zott with Zott Auto Group talking about the impact that it has on business. And Thad, it's always good to see you. You're a friend and a good person and a hardworking business guy. Great to see you here on The Pulse.
Appreciate the invite.
So let's talk about this. So we have that 25% auto tariff that goes into effect May 3rd, and there's a lot of buzz around that. So even though the tariff technically on the autos hasn't gone into effect, what are you noticing at the dealership?
Well, there is a little bit of an unsettled market right now. Ironically, March was our best auto group month we've had in over 2 years. Our biggest volume month we've had in at least 24 months. I think a lot of that surge, and we saw it nationally as well, was due to customers' concerns with will prices go up. So they were watching you, they're watching the news, they're worried about the prices of vehicles going up, the payments going up, and they came into the showroom. So last month was a great month.
So now we know that everyone is kind of listening closely to what's happening in D.C. and this president. The president now saying, hey, I'm talking to the big three. He's talking to Bill Ford Jr. He's talking, I would presumably, to Mary Barra and those at Stellantis. And they're saying, hey, we're trying to figure out how to give them more time to make a plan to build stuff in the U.S. Are you hopeful that that talk will somehow alleviate some of the anticipatory pain of these tariffs?
I think so. I think President Trump in Washington realizes the importance of the auto industry nationally. Certainly here in Michigan, it's even more impactful. And we all have a stake, right? I mean, politics aside, especially in this town, we all have a stake in this industry. So I know that our government in Michigan, leadership-wise, is communicating with Washington. I know people from, Detroit Auto Dealers Association, Michigan Auto Dealers Association, and the National Auto Dealers Association are actively communicating with Washington as well, along with the big three, and some other people who have interest in the car industry and putting pressure on Washington, making sure they realize, an unsettled market is not healthy for our industry. So whatever we can do to kind of calm the nerves of the consumer.
So when you hear the president say things like, I don't want to hurt anyone, and I am talking to folks in the auto industry, does that give you hope that perhaps these auto tariffs won't go into effect May 3rd?
It does give me hope. I think it gives the whole country hope. I think he's leveraging those tariffs to bring a lot of things back to the United States. It's creating a little bit of an unsettled consumer, mindset right now. So we're looking for his leadership to calm that. Like I said, you look at all these states individually, and you look at the tax revenue that comes in from vehicle sales, it's massive. It's a huge portion of every state's budget. So every state out there has a very big interest in making sure we keep these auto sales rolling, and then it cascades down, right? When car dealers aren't necessarily doing great, it affects a lot of different industries.
I do want to ask you a little bit about the difference between the parts and the car itself. Initially when he made this announcement, people said, are these 25% tariffs on the parts or are they on the finished product? Talk about the difference that makes for you and what you expect to see with the brands that you represent and others.
Yeah, I think every manufacturer faces a little bit of a different, critical need. We have Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Ford, and Toyota, and so we're very close to those brands, and each one of those brands have different issues with the whole tariff, potential coming down the pipeline.
An example of that would be that Ford makes, I think, 70% plus of their vehicles in the U.S.
Correct.
But what about the parts? Does that affect the equation at the end?
The equation, it sounds like they're actually going to have to put in a vehicle number when it's coming across the border, and it will tell you the percentage of parts that are being tariffed. It's really kind of complicated right now. we just don't want to disrupt the supply chain, right? We don't want to disrupt the supply chain, not only for building new vehicles, but also we need to fix vehicles in this country and in this state. So any disruption in any type of parts supply is going to, hurt our customers that have their vehicles in the shop that need a part to get it fixed. So my best advice to people out there, get in the showrooms now if you're looking for a vehicle, because they're not tariffed. All the vehicles on the lot right now are not tariffed, and right now parts are flowing pretty well. So if you have an issue with your vehicle, you need a repair, the sooner you get in, the better. Now, we're hopeful that there won't be an issue, but again, there's that urgency factor for everybody.
So we should mention again, the 25% auto parts tariff doesn't go into effect until May 3rd. The president, just as in the last 48 hours, saying, I'm talking to the autos, we're trying to see if we can kind of delay, give them more time. But this is the opportunity for the customers at home. If you have a kid that needs a car, if you need a car, this is the time to go shopping.
Yeah, you got to realize everything we have on our parts shelves right now and everything we have in inventory for vehicle-wise have not been tariffed right now. Now, some manufacturers have a 90-day plus supply of inventory on the ground, but you look at like Toyota, they're somewhere around a 15-day supply. So, it's a little more critical for Toyota right now because they don't have a big shelf of vehicles to sell. We sell up into the pipeline at Toyota because we sell the incoming vehicles. And some of those, we're a little bit concerned with how the price is going to change on those. Hopefully, they find a solution. I know they're getting a lot of pressure in Washington. I know President Trump wants to keep auto sales rolling, so I do feel they're going to come up with a solution.
I bet he's going to talk about it in Michigan when he comes on next week.
Next week. So some big announcement, so we'll stay tuned.
All right, Dad, you know what? You and your whole family, you do a lot for this community. The Zott name is well known for good reason, not just for the cars, but for what you do. So thank you for what you do.
The community's great to us, and we do what we can do to give back to them as well.
Always good to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for your time on the Pulse tonight. We're keeping the tariff talk continuing after the break. Republican Perry Johnson and Democrat Coleman Young Jr. in the hot seat. You're watching the Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on the Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about President Trump's tariff policies and other issues, Detroit City Council member Coleman Young II and former Republican candidate for governor Perry Johnson. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here. I want to start with Perry here because we're talking about an industry that you know a heck of a lot about. You've had the president's ear. You talked to him. And you're a friend of the president. Are you telling him what effect these tariffs would have on Michigan and the auto industry?
Actually, I think one of the reasons that he got into this was to help the auto industry. Keep in mind that people don't realize what's really going on in the world and what's been going on all these years, because there has not been any kind of equal balance between one country and another. I'll give you a perfect example. We think everything has to do with tariffs and just tariffs. But what about the fairness of trade? We have companies that are trying to get into England, our best buddy. They can come here, we can't go there. And suddenly, out of the blue, Perry Johnson gets a call from the head of the laboratory accreditation, the former head of UCAS, saying maybe it's time that UCAS has a competitor. Because notice, UCAS is in the United States, but we're not allowed to go in there. And suddenly, they have opened the door and said, now we can actually go into that country.
So you're saying there needs to be fair trade, and that's something that for many decades we haven't seen in the United States. And Coleman Young Jr., you would know also, because you read and you talk to people and you understand, that this has not been an even trading equation and ecosystem for the U.S. across the world, right?
Rube, you look like new money, man. It's always good to be with you, my guy, my main man, $100 grand. Listen, let me just say this to you first and foremost. I'm not necessarily opposed to what he's doing. I'm opposed to the way he's doing it. It's like you always say. We need a scalpel, not a machete, not a bazooka. And the way in which he's doing it, first of all, the way in which he has antagonized Canada by saying they're going to be the 51st state. And then on top of that, levying a 25% tariff. That's on top of the 10% baseline tariff. I think he's wrong. Also, I understand where he's coming from in terms of how this started in 2010 with a currency war, because China has manipulated its currency. It doesn't allow us to sell our products products into their country. It also steals our intellectual property and then makes products similar to that.
So we should punch back, right?
You could punch back with the Commerce Department. That's what the Commerce Department is supposed to do. And I understand if he targeted this towards China, but the way he's doing is the broad way in which he's doing it, and particularly in the time now, you're adding on the cost. It just determines the way in which parts go across the border and back.
But
in terms of going to Mexico, then going back to the U.S., you're going to charge a tariff each time, because that's what it is, a tax on the imported product. Each time it goes in,
let's talk about the
people are going to get laid off, unfortunately. We're talking about recession. I hope not, but that's where we're going.
But the results so far shake out like this. If you are a Trump supporter, and we have plenty of them who watch, they'll tell you that already 100 countries have come to the table to say, hey, we'd like to talk with you and figure out a way to make this work. The auto industry, the auto tariff, now they're saying, hey, we may actually pause and wait a little while and give you some time. So it appears as though, according to many supporters of Donald Trump, that he is just doing this as a negotiation.
Right.
If that's the case, do you support it?
Well, first of all, I think it's ham-handed. I think it's dangerous. I think it's reckless, one, the way he's doing it. Secondly, China has it, and they have been levied a 145% tariff. And I think that's something that's critical. One, because not only are they issuing reciprocal tariffs, but also because they own the second amount of the largest of our debt. They could recall our debt and put us in even further economic peril. And I think to play with people's lives like this, eggs are going up, food is going up. The costs are too high.
The Treasury Secretary,
and he's backed off the tariffs that he levied when the economy started going down.
Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, Perry, said just the other day, you know what, this isn't sustainable, this trade war with China, and so it's going to ease up. And that gave the stock market a bump, and many people were excited about that. Do you think that's the case here?
Actually, in some ways it has eased up, but keep in mind, a lot of these tariffs were really only at about 12.5% when they baked it all out. But never forget what really happened in China. About, what was it, 15 years ago, China decided they were going to dump all of the steel into the United States. The government supported the steel industry so they could produce steel at such a low price that they brought it to the United States. They sold it for less than our cost to produce it. Can you imagine this country without a steel industry, without an aluminum industry, without a car industry, without the ability to make tanks, without the ability to make ships, without the ability to make airplanes? We couldn't survive.
No, you're talking to the son of someone who worked, my father worked at General Dynamics and worked at General Motors and worked at Ford. So we understand the importance of having a supply chain here in this country. No one, as you say, is arguing the fact that we need to change things. The question is how.
How you do it.
So my question to you now is, what is the right thing to do? You actually have the president's ear. If he says, hey, Perry, when he comes to Michigan next week, and he says, Perry, I think I'm going to go ahead with the tariffs, 25%, starting May 3rd. What do you tell him?
Well, it depends on what he's going to tariff.
The auto parts?
I think what he needs to do is to have some kind of a fair arrangement between the countries. I'll ask you this. I believe one of the real goals is to have fair trade and to eliminate tariffs. We should eliminate tariffs to Europe. We shouldn't have to pay those tariffs. We already have this ridiculous VAT we pay, which is at least 19%. And
that's a value-added tax, right?
Well, it's a sales tax. We don't have it here.
Sure.
So the bottom line, and we don't get it back. If they have it over there, they get to have, they need to file statements and they get that VAT back, so it's no real cost.
Perry, would you push back a little bit against anyone in the Trump administration who tells you that a 25% auto parts tariff could hurt people in Michigan? Would you say that to the president or his people?
What I would do is ask, what's our real goal in the end? And let him tell me if he really wants to tell me what the goal is. But you and I both know that there is no one that has done more negotiating in his life than President Trump. He is probably the master negotiator of negotiators. That's how he made his living. That's how he built his empire.
Let's talk about Hegseth for a moment, the Defense Secretary. There were calls for him to resign after that signal gate. And by the way, you put the word gate on the back of something and people call conspiracies. The bottom line is there's a lot of truth to what happened here. He actually had an internet line set up in his Defense Department office saying, why don't we connect this to my personal computer.
The Signal app.
And the Signal app. And then texting his wife and brother. Is this something that you think is becoming of a defense secretary, Perry?
Well, if you were to ask him, I'm sure that Peter Hegseth would probably say I probably shouldn't have done this, but nobody really knows where this attack was to take place.
Coleman, he's had the opportunity to say that I shouldn't have done this. But he has had the opportunity to say I shouldn't have done this, and he has not
done this.
Listen.
But nobody knew the location. We have, what, 700,000 civilians working in this Pentagon. We have all these operations going on. We don't know where it went.
But you certainly shouldn't be texting your wife or your brother, right? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, listen. I love Perry, but he's twisted himself up in knots trying to do it. He's like an octopus with roller skates on right now. Listen, here's the bottom line. He had no business doing this. This was classified information. One, not only him, but also the Mike Waltz, the National Defense Advisor, who let the journalist on, Mike Goldberg, who heard about this classified information that he was talking about this military strike. Well, he should be let go for that. Personally, I don't think he should have ever been Secretary of Defense in the first place. Not qualified.
Mike Waltz,
but Mike Waltz should be go, and he should go as well, because he said the line was secure when it was.
I got to tell you something. If you just switch out names and you say Hillary Clinton and you talk about her server that was sitting in her house.
Can you imagine Lloyd Austin did that?
In upstate New York, perhaps we'd have a different conversation.
Barack Obama did that?
By the way, when she did all this texting and whatever, nobody...
please. She did not reveal classified information to a journalist.
Didn't even fire her.
Over a public...
Listen, wrong is wrong, whether you're blue or you're red. And we're going to call it out each and every time. And we talked about Hillary the other day. We're talking about Hegseth now. These are human beings. These are not demigods. They're fallible, just like everybody else. Good to see you, Perry Johnson, my friend. Always good to be with you.
Fallible, another job. Always good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. We'll see you again. I got to reach across the aisle there. It's the first 100-day report card for President Trump. We're checking in on his approval ratings. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. It is people, power, and politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. A lot going on, as always, in the world of politics. So let's get you caught up with some of the big stories we're covering right now. Starting with the signal scandal. We touched on this just a second ago, involving Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. According to two people familiar with the line, Hegseth had an internet line set up in his office that bypassed Pentagon security protocols. That was also he could use Signal on a personal computer. Other Pentagon offices have used that type of a line, especially if they need to keep an eye on blocked websites. But they can expose users to hacking. Hegseth is under fire for sending sensitive information about airstrikes to two separate Signal group chats. One mistakenly included an Atlantic reporter. The other included his wife, brother, and 11 other people. And a new poll shows mixed results for President Trump as he nears 100 days in office. According to a Fox News poll, while most people approve of how he's handling border security, they disapprove of how he's handling the economy, foreign policy, and tariffs. 55% say they have an overall disapproval of the president so far in his 100 days. And finally tonight, lawmakers in Lansing are trying to figure out what a cell phone ban in schools could look like. The bill's sponsor in the House wants districts across the state to have some baseline requirements, but give them the flexibility to go beyond that.
We wait for all 886 to come up with a program. We're going to be waiting a long time. We're just trying to establish a baseline for the school districts to operate off of, and then they can be as creative within those baseline guidelines, or as strict, more strict.
If Michigan does end up passing a ban into law, they'll join 9 other states in restricting cell phone uses in class. Well, that is The Pulse tonight. Remember, you can always email us your political questions or a fact check you want to see. thepulse@fox.com, or you can use that QR code right there on your screen. I'm Rup Raj. As always, we'll see you tomorrow night. Have a good one.